So, good morning. It's still morning. It's 11:30. I am Dr. Joya Clark. I am proud to be here at the 2022 Roadmap to Educational Equity Conference. And I am here to talk about educational equity and novice juvenile correctional educators. So I want to open up the conversation today with some recent research. This was published in 2020, and I think it's a really great place for us to just open up and start having discourse. So this research was conducted by Jaggi, Kluwer, and Langton, and they discussed one of their key findings was attachment to facility, school, and community outcomes. So firstly, their findings showed a relation between higher attachment to the facility, school, more gainful activity in the community upon reentry, and less delinquency up to 1 year after release. And that is because of positive relationships with their educators while the students were detained or incarcerated. They found that attachment to the school constituted positive relationships with teachers and two motivational indicators: the amount of time spent on homework and the students' orientation towards school, so how they felt about school, their attitude towards school. And taken together, school attachment stood apart in predicting adjustment back into the community and trumped grades. So we're here to just have an open dialogue about the potential effect of juvenile correctional educators and the relationship that students have with them on reducing the rate of recidivism in the community. So I just wanted to open up the dialogue. I have my colleague here who also works with me. We're both school teachers at the Essex County Juvenile Detention Center. We're both science teachers, so we kind of split up the work. Mr. Rajan does the biology, the environmental science, earth science. I teach the chemistry and physics, but to be honest with you, we both share the load. We teach a little bit of everything together. And so I'm going to open up with Mr. Rajan, and then I'm going to, of course, ask the people who are here what the question about in the classroom. Have you actually experienced evidence of this? Like, have you seen this in your work where you see that the students' valuing of school and their attachment to school actually is closely tied to their relationship with you? You can take the mic.
All right. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see all of you here. So one of the first things that I see at teaching at such a place is, the ability of the children to communicate with somebody as young as me and try to remember that even when they leave the facility and in some cases come back. So that itself is a strong evidence of what kind of impact we make in their lives. Like for example, even yesterday I had a child saying that small little bit of fraction in math that I taught him 2 years ago. So, and he got better at it. Okay, so even though it did not affect much of his life in incarceration, but this is a strong evidence that they take back a lot of the emotional learning, the connection that we make with them after they leave, with a strong purpose to not come back. It's unfortunate they come back, but there have been a lot of instances that I observed that children improve very much. They go back to school, but graduation, going back to college, that's not in our hands. But because they spend so much time on us and they believe in us, because probably they don't have a strong family or a strong friend circle. They depend and they believe so much in us for the future. And that kind of positive vibration that they take back after they leave the facility, we get to see that. We see some improvement. It's obviously very difficult to expect something compared to a regular school, but that impact is truly, and it's emotionally very challenging to face. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I want to also engage the audience because my talk today is also about recidivism. So looking at Jaggi, Kluwer's, and Langton's work and their findings, they saw a positive effect when the juveniles went back to their communities, their ability to get engaged, their ability to go back to school, their ability to find positive things. But that effect was not long lasting. It was maybe up to 6 months. And if there was not a connection between the educational program, the juvenile detention center, and people, stakeholders in the community, very quickly those students turn right back to the activities they were doing before. So if anyone in the audience wants to speak to, where do you see potential for people like yourselves in the community that have a heart to connect in some way with what's going on inside of, the experience that young people are having inside of these facilities? What potential do you see, or what need do you see for that collaborative effort between the school programs or the facilities and stakeholders in the community?
Hi, my name is Donna Beck, and I think that it's more than one issue because as an educator, when we have to, bring these students back into our school system, it's not enough that we just connect to their experiences from where they were, but we have to some way change the environment or get them to realize that they can't, how to avoid the same environment. Because if you come back home to the same situation, the same kids in the block, the same neighborhood, the same stuff, I mean, it's just a matter of time before, it drags you back in. And, we're just products of our childhood and what we've learned as children. So it's a horrible cycle. I'm from the Atlantic City area, and, I go back home and I see my nephews and I'm like, wow, how do we have to figure out how to change the environment, or how to at least get them to look at their environment that they have to come back to differently. Because if we just keep bringing them back into the same environment, eventually it's all that they know. So, right, and we mean well when we put these programs in, we develop these we do, we really do mean well. But we have to, it's like an onion that we just, we're not really getting to the core of the onion. The rotten part of the onion. It's in the middle of the onion. And we're just constantly, doing that Band-Aid approach and not getting to the core of the problem, which is...
Thank you so much for that. It's so true. And here in New Jersey, and I may get a chance to show some of those data, we have a New Jersey Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative, which I think is absolutely amazing. But from the perspective of the teacher inside of the juvenile detention center, they keep running from the therapeutic program. So why is it that they leave the larger facility like Essex County Juvenile Detention Center? I'm celebrating, oh, you got in a program. They go to the program and then they run for the program. So my big question, at this point in my career is, where is the disconnect? We need to be talking to each other, and I have yet to. I've been in this since 2016. I have yet to be at a table that was, myself, someone from one of the more therapeutic environments. I have yet to be at a table where we really were in dialogue with each other. This onion that you speak of, I love that. I love that analogy.
Thank you. And I just want, my name is Che Coulter, and I want to encourage what the lady before me said, in terms of really reaching toward the students. To respond to your question, coming into this body of work through behavioral intervention in North Philadelphia, and then coming and doing this work in Newark, New Jersey, I always focused on my contribution is the behavioral redirection. Even if I cannot get a child to make an 180-degree turn, I don't want them making a 360-degree turn because they end up right back where.
Absolutely.
So I need them to make adjustments, and then I need them to buy into a life safety plan that I've crafted with the team there at the juvenile justice facility, wherever that is, kind of the environment you work in, which is more of a clinical space than the traditional, or I would say the historical school district. So there's a broader framework that, yes, broader conversations need to happen with both school districts, those clinical teams at the school district level, to not allow those juvenile defendants to become further alienated by more adults outside of their family. Because they've already been, in some, a significant percentage of them have already been alienated. You won't see family come to their visit day. So we know that it's tangible alienation. They're attached to your program because y'all, in some instances, are peeling back that onion that she referenced on their identity. So you're essentially one of the first humanistic experiences that they have where someone is pouring into their heart and getting them to see their self-value, where they shift this dynamic between their lifestyle becomes more valuable, and they want to appreciate their life and look at their life to have a safety blueprint around it because some of their neighborhoods are so dangerous. Versus this, we'll hear it in the music, they're weighing their lifestyle versus their death style. There was a time in the community where when Brother Bozeman was coming out of high school, your lifestyle was kind of like really valued. You look forward to your lifestyle, living until you're 93, living until you're into your 80s, going golfing, getting married, having a house. Whereas now, they're skeptical if they'll make it past 25.
Yes.
So we know that there's more supports that are needed in therapeutic interventions, but behavioral redirection has been my start, and for me, the best intervention has been prevention. But we don't want to end up talking all day, but I think that's one of the reasons why you see.
Intervention has been prevention. I think
Yes.
that was the golden nugget of what you have said.
Yeah, I learned that from him. That's not.
Well,
I learned it from him, then I put it in practice.
it's a golden nugget.
It's proactive instead of reactive.
Well, Donna, how did you escape, that? I don't ever like to put too much emphasis on parents because that nuclear parent thing has dissolved over
Absolutely.
years.
Absolutely.
And to your point about
It's hard.
community, the community has dissolved over the years.
Yes, it has.
My whole community looked out for me. I couldn't do nothing in the next block
Wouldn't
around
be
the
here without my
corner.
community.
I
Absolutely.
couldn't do anything. Everybody was a truant officer, even the winos. Hey, Junior, you supposed to be in school today? I'm going to pay the light bill. So,
Until we get back to that.
and my kids on my block, when they was up in the next block, I knew there's at least 3 sets of eyes on them. And they would call me or come down or go out there and grab them themselves.
You allowed
This
to.
is my neighbor.
You allowed to.
And it worked out to a great benefit of community because before we had these cell phones and all these things, if I got caught in a snowstorm at work and could not get home at 5 or 4:30 or 6 o'clock, I wasn't worried about was my kids outside in the street shivering somewhere because there was 5 or 6 houses that they could go into.
Yes.
But now today, and we talk about trying to intervene, and you're a coach,
Right.
and you can step in for an absentee dad, or mother that needs help as a coach. But
Can't do that.
all that stuff is broken down. Kids can't even ride a bike in the street. All these toys that come out, skateboards and all that stuff, kids can't take a $50 skateboard out in the street. So what do? They come in the house and they play video games and somebody else gets control over their thought process because they're not engaging socially with anybody else. So we wonder why they shooting each other in the street because they never played together. They never played touch football against each other. They never played baseball against each other. So they what they see on the video game, I'm supposed to be a gangster.
Oh,
And they don't have that many friends.
Losing connection with reality, really.
almost like different than a financial benefit, I almost want to call it, because when I moved from the South Ward of Newark into Glen Ridge had racism that exists there,
Of course.
but Glen Ridge had social equity. It had social equity. It was an invisible thing between parents that this information that we share, if your child is involved with something that's helping them be prepared, I need to know about it, not to be nosy, but to share that social equity.
Wow.
I think there was more social equity, at least in urban communities. If I don't, and cut me off or correct me if there was some more authentic social equity in the community in the past, and I think we can bring some of that, reduplicate some of that, so that that social equity is helping these school districts, the students who are coming from the historical local districts into the juvenile school districts, the judicial districts.
Right.
Those local school districts are still responsible in the scope of comprehensive equity, which the state of New Jersey holds them to. They still have an obligation to support the students behind the walls that you serve. And I don't know, for them not
Wow.
to talk to the court system, it's an even broader concern, because social equity has to have taken some sort of hit if they're feeling so attached to your facility, where even, they're running from these other programs. And there are success stories where several of those students are going
Absolutely.
to get their GED
And thank you for introducing that. So there are many success stories, and even Mr. Rajan and I have worked with students that we invited here to NJIT to participate in robotics programs as a part of their reentry, and we've seen a couple of those students. They are now in college. So there are the success stories, absolutely. I think the conversation is just, how do we increase those numbers? Even while we're celebrating the few, the conversation is, how do we magnify this conversation surrounding the social equity even within the institutions, in the neighborhoods, yes, in the homes, yes, but even within the institutions.
I'm not
How do we?
negative or playing the devil's advocate or doomsday person, but we can always talk about the 10 to 20%. We can go to the 20/80. I don't want 20% of my food to be good and the other 80% to be questionable. And so therefore we say, oh, there's a shooting star, there's a shooting star, there's a shooting star. This person coming out of college, this person doing this person doing that.
Absolutely.
And to speak to the ladies, I have a granddaughter, I have nieces, and they all got college degrees. But I don't know if they're gonna become family people because somebody else is influencing the young gentlemen who could have been potential fathers and husbands, because that world is being more pushed on young black men than the successful stuff. So yeah, we can tap dance and the Lord, all the little ones that get through this ceiling, glass wall, all that stuff. But when you look at the total picture, the percentage is just too small, because we don't get control of the mechanisms that control a young mind.
That is so
And we
rich.
have to
That
get
is
into
so
the
rich.
mechanisms that control your mind, and then we can counter certain things. People today, and it's people that influence them, And they had it's so many things. That's the old problem. Could be Facebook, could be Twitter, could be TikTok, could be this, could be that.
Absolutely.
They spend more time looking at that.
Absolutely.
Looking at a book,
Absolutely. And that actually speaks to what the panelists were talking about this morning about, bringing the literature, the historical figures, introducing a different narrative to them often enough that when they come into their educational spaces or other spaces that we create for them, they can see themselves in something different than what they're constantly, looking at on social media or on YouTube. So I think it kind of brings the conversation really full circle. So I'm just gonna introduce you to some data. I was speaking earlier to the New Jersey Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative. So this is some data just for us to think about. And I pose a question, why do we need to really study juvenile correctional education? Why do we need to care so much about, this conversation? And if you look at some of the data, you see the average daily population percentages, and you can see that although, we're kind of celebrating a reduction in the capacity, we kind of have still some really complex issues that we are dealing with. Even as we see the daily capacity going down, other things like the length of stay in some places are going up. So how do we make those two things how do we understand that? So the Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative shows that the average daily population is lower than capacity in most counties due to this success, but facilities such as the one that I work in frequently house students with the most serious charges, and they're facing the lengthiest sentences. Although most facilities like ours have been shut down due to the negative effects of detainment on youth, novice teachers beginning their careers in this environment are entering a very complex situation. Even as we're celebrating reduction in the use of detainment, youth there are subjected to an environment that's becoming increasingly more restrictive. So that's what I wanted to pose for our next conversation. An indicator of this, if you want to check it out, there's a 2021 room restriction report. So how do we define room restriction? And this is key for us to think about. Okay, so room restriction is defined as the placement of a juvenile in a locked room or cell for 22 to 24 hours per day, although they did count some lesser increments. The report presented that in 2021, room restrictions in county detention facilities ranged from a low of 8 instances in Ocean County, okay, get this, to a high of 665 in Essex. Look at that difference.
Every year?
This was in the last report that they did for 2021.
Is that because of gangs or
Well, that's what we need to kind of dig about a little bit, because they don't know, and they haven't reported on the reasons why, but they're reporting these numbers. So the rate of room restrictions per population ranged from a low of 0.93 in Ocean to a high of 6.35 in Essex. The average duration ranged from 1.88 hours in Ocean to 39.30 hours in Essex, okay? So in my research, let me see if I could get to.
Can I add a small point to that? Can I add a small point?
Absolutely. So,
Just a very small
activities
thing.
like what Mr. Rajan and I might want to do.
So even though that data says, the number of children getting into the detention center has reduced, but you have to look at it in such a way: the children who are coming now to the detention center, they are here for crimes that are way beyond the children who were there before. So what is the effect of those children leaving the detention center on other regular schools?
Absolutely.
Okay, so because what happens is, if you lock up 10 people with serious crimes in one place, it's never going to improve their situation, leave alone their situation. But when these children go outside, it's going to spread, like the virus. And that's going to have a very long effect, which, nobody can control. They go out with something which is very powerful, because you never try to improve them in the facility. and when you go out, it's the consequences of keeping something like that in room restriction. That's I don't think even technology can try to stop something. And we are seeing that in New York, we are seeing that even in our detention center. So having lower numbers is no way improvement as far as I see it. That's a
Thank you so much.
Work on Sussex Avenue?
Essex County, Duray Street.
He and I are both in what is commonly called the youth house. We're on Dorrier Street.
Dorrier Street.
Yeah.
That's not the Joe Clark facility, is it?
Used to be.
Used to be. Okay, that's all. I just
Okay.
asked that. That's all.
So, I wanted to kind of dig into this complex issue.
You say dig into, you're referencing the disparities in the statistical data?
And in what Mr. Rajan was.
It's an inferential, I'm just telling my inference out of it. Like that data is really not something which is showing an improvement in the lives of children who get locked up or incarceration. Because what is happening is you reduce the numbers, but that doesn't mean you reduce the numbers, but the crime that has been committed, that's getting even more serious.
So you
Before you get-
100% capacity,
Yeah,
and just because there's less, youth in the facility doesn't mean that
yeah.
And I think he was saying that, I don't want to speak for him, but just that I noticed. My nephews, who juveniles, they went into juvenile detention and this, that, and that. When they came out, they were more dangerous drug dealers than before they went in. Because when they went in, it was like going to college. It's like going to camp to learn some skills, how to move yourself from the product and get more younger runners, because they go into the juvenile facility and they ain't gonna come back and put you in the raw way. So they learn that by being incarcerated or being
In a
the
way,
juvenile
maybe it's the survival instincts. They're improving their survival instincts. If you can survive in a place like that, you can survive anywhere.
Question.
Yeah.
When you're saying survival instincts, are you talking about their experiential intelligence,
Their
their ability
Their
to
ex-
cope, their ability
their
to cope?
ability to cope and go through this challenging environments.
And come out and brag about that they did it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And,
It
So-
would take the courage
find a
of
way to
See, you have the
economically
courage.
to assessment. How do we assess
Absolutely.
that?
You have the courage to live in such a facility where you're locked up for 24 hours, 48 hours. See, you're coming out of something and you're I won't use the word ego, but you're getting that confidence
Absolutely.
that, I can go back to the place and still survive. And I'm still just going to say the seriousness of the crime which has to be addressed. It's not the numbers. We have to see what is the level of crime for which the children are getting, and we don't get information on
Yeah,
that.
the other thing that both of you touched on was that, because we hear, I live over in Irvington. Again, I'm from Atlantic City area, and so I've seen enough, and I've done enough stories working in news with young people. It's heartbreaking, and as a teacher, and you do hear it. Hey, I did my bit. I did this, and it becomes a badge of honor almost. Mm-hmm. And then, as a teacher, these young people do come back, and with this S on their chest, so to speak, and now influencing other kids. So yeah, getting to what you had said, again, it's that whole cyclical thing that at some point we do need to figure out how do we stop it, how do we address it. And I'm glad that the discussion is starting now, because I'm so impressed with all three of you. My sister here, absolutely.
And how do we encourage, these community connections in the therapeutic environments that are going to really be necessary in order to get to, the bottom of what's really causing them to act out? How do we start looking at behavioral interventions in a different way so that we can start to understand, why this is happening and what's going on internally in the child? So just to kind of wrap up, I'll talk a little bit about my research, my PhD research. And my answer was to start looking at the experiences that juvenile correctional educators are having when they first come into this line of work. And alarmingly, through my research, I found that there really is very little support or preparation really right now for most juvenile correctional educators. Are just sort of thrown in, you figure it out as you go along, and maybe somebody will match you with someone that's more experienced, and they're supposed to just sort of teach you the tools of the trade day to day. This is not what's acceptable in other places. So in a place where we know that you need training if you're going to do behavioral intervention, right? How could it be acceptable that training is not provided when a person really is just trying to figure out their craft? So I designed a juvenile correctional educational coaching model, and just really quickly, I intentionally allowed novice correctional educators to choose coaches. We set up a regular series of instruments where they can reflect upon their experiences and talk about the issues that they're facing, and really draw from people that have been in this for a while to really go through as they're teaching what the issues are and what they can do to address it. So a couple of things that were cool about it was, instead of, just throwing up your hands and saying, oh, we don't get the PD we need, we said, well, we're not going to worry. We're not going to let that stop us. What we're going to do is form our own communities of practice, okay? Communities of professional practice. And we're going to glean the knowledge that we have and make sure intentionally that it gets passed down to the novices. So just real quickly, I'll go to my findings, and then we'll open up a conversation about what I discovered through my research. So I looked at the values, attitudes, and beliefs. The values that came out of my research were that juvenile correctional educators, when they're novices, have high expectations of lesson content delivery and student engagement. So they actually do have high expectations of the content that's supposed to be taught in mathematics, in science, in all the subject areas. They do have high expectations from their students. They want their students to come to class and learn. They want to see evidence that the students are enjoying it and that they're engaged. They value working together as a team and receiving feedback and encouragement from each other. So when they are isolated from each other, that has a damaging effect. They value creativity and flexibility. They want to find ways to be creative, to create their own curriculum, as the mayor was talking about earlier. They just don't often get the materials that they request. They don't often get the opportunity to design their own curriculum. It's not that they don't have the ideas. They definitely have the ideas. It came out during my research that they were very creative during that time. It's just that sometimes they're not asked. Their attitudes. They had some very, some feelings that they were isolated, that they were separated from their students. They were very limited. They felt limited by the technology constraints. Sometimes the struggle that they had with the internet is a big one. Okay, so that's a whole conversation to itself, but it is very challenging in a correctional facility to provide some access to the internet to the extent that students can still have a rich educational experience that is, since this is an equity conference, that is equitable to what they would have outside, but not allow the students to have access to the outside where they may, be able to contact either other people in the case or victims or whatever. It's a challenge. Witnesses. So it's a challenge to do that. So that poses some constraints on education, and that was a frustration that they experienced. But they had a very passionate feeling about their students' emotional needs, that their students are human beings, that they need to take into consideration the emotional experiences that their students are having in the housing units where they live, where they may be dealing with gang affiliations, and they might come to class like absolutely afraid for their lives. Okay? So they were very concerned about how can we find ways to deal with helping our students to work through those issues, or just be able to still connect with them despite the fact that the students are having those issues. And then the beliefs that came out of my research were that juvenile correctional educators have very, they have ideas about what their purpose is that are very important to them. It's important to their identity. What the purpose of juvenile correctional education is, that it is for the students, that the maybe the other educational institutions that they are either actually attending or they don't go to school when they're not detained or incarcerated, that our purpose is to reach that student that maybe has been left behind. And that this was quite surprising to me, that the juvenile correctional educators really believe that students should have power over their learning experiences. So today's panel really, I was so happy to hear about student voice. So, my question, and now I'll turn that over, and this will be the last time that I do that. My question is, for those of us that are really concerned about teaching and learning in this environment, how do we encourage student voice in a place where student voices are not respected and where student voices are constantly being, I won't say silenced, but in some cases they are. They really are not respected. So how do we still, encourage students to find their voice? What are some of the ways in which we can do that? And I'll give my one. I have a teacher anecdote, because in as much as I'm in this PhD world, I'm a school teacher at heart, so I'm in this battle right now, because my previous principal gave us access to these things called Edovo tablets, EDOVO. I think they're amazing. They're used usually in adult prisons, but they give students access to all types of things about their spirituality and reentry, and there's more. Even if you have a long sentence, there's more to life that you could prepare for. So I'm in this battle to get these things implemented. And I had an amazing, with student voice and student power experience where I said, okay, let's write a letter. Let's write a letter, and you advocate for yourself, advocate for the use of these, and help me as a school teacher get these things upstairs so that you can have access to them. And the students, fascinated. They absolutely amazed me. They stepped up to the plate in an amazing way. And those letters, the use of vocabulary, how articulate they were, how passionately they expressed themselves, it was like one of those moments that you're like, yes, this is why I do what I do. This is amazing. So, I just want to give everyone a chance to talk about how do we do that? How do we give them a voice in a restrictive environment where it's becoming increasingly restrictive? What are some of the things we can do?
I think this one is simple. This question is simple for me, because I think education will liberate these children. So we have to stick to the main idea that, communicate to the child that, I'm from a different country. So the first thing which amazed me over here when I came here is the class teachers are telling the students, you have to learn to be successful. I was a little taken aback because they never say that in my country. So I tell my children in this, you have to learn for your own good. Forget about, if you do that, automatically you're going to become successful. If you do the math, what is happening? You're thinking. You have to start thinking, there's a lot of reasoning happening inside your head when you're doing this question. Finding a job, that's later on, how this will help you in your life, that's later on. Do it for your own nourishment. And if we can do something like that, use education as a liberation, something like, what Ms. Clark said, the tablets, the children should start speaking for their own education as well. We want this kind of education. And that can come through, removing this ignorance from them. And, the first step should be, we as educators should try to teach them, other than math, science, teach them the value of education. What essentially education is going to do for their soul, for their heart, and for their mind. That's always been my, my principal thing whenever I teach something. And if we can, establish that, then children will find a way to teach themselves. And why do children go on YouTube? They're going there. There's a lot of, thing, but there's a lot of information as well. The future is that, children are going to learn from the internet. They are going to learn from virtual lessons. I graduated from NJIT, and a lot of children now enroll in hybrid lessons. That's the future. We cannot, turn around things. And people are benefiting from that kind of environment. So we cannot say that children should not be on YouTube. There's a lot to learn from the internet and a lot to not learn. So if they understand the purpose of education, I think, we have set the, the platform.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Anyone in the audience, did you have anything to share?
Very briefly, just to encourage what he was saying, education is a process from the womb to the tomb. So it's a lifelong process, and if they can understand that it's a lifelong process, while they're at their stay with you, that needs to translate into some sort of skill training where, and let me move away from just vocational, because I start getting back into my mode as if the students are here with me, my students, my most at risk. So voice, which is different than the vocational aspect, that would come from what I referenced earlier, the social equity that exists within that building. There's a leadership structure within their own social constructs within the facility, and leadership training can still happen within their population there. If there's a way that they can use their transferable skills from the streets in the building, they can deputize their power amongst each other throughout the building. Whereas they learn structures and a representative government to, not like place demands on the staff for better conditions, but at least on this academic piece, some sort of leadership board where the students, inmate population, can communicate and represent their needs, and now they feel like they have a buy-in and some kind of voice to advocate for the changes that they want to improve their quality of life while they're there. So kind of like training the students in how how power can be deputized, and that power would be deputized through some sort of representative format amongst them. I'm talking about the card players in the building, the chess players in the building, the ones who are the alpha males and the alpha females. They need leadership training. That's what we did in North Philadelphia, and that's what I've done since I worked with that population in Newark.
Well, all you good folks, all the good folks in America, have good aspirations, altruistic and things like that. But you should take some tips from the negative people and how they control all of our behaviors. You have to use the mechanisms that they use. They know where you're going to be for 8 hours when Super Bowl day comes. The commercial people know that those minutes is like $1 million a second for a commercial, because it's an influencer. If you want to get something done in this country, you have to get in charge of the mass mechanisms that changes people's behavior. Because I can get, if you listen, you don't listen to my station. If you go to South Jersey or go to Arizona or go to these places, let your radio find a station as you ride through Oklahoma, as you ride through Montana, and you will see, you will hear what those people are getting every day, which will cause them to attack the White House with bear spray, bullets, whatever they had, will cause them to attack Pelosi's house with a hammer, will cause them to make a noose and a scalpel to hang the vice president, because they have been inundated with mass manipulation, and they control that. And this is why you only have a certain number of channels, and if anybody like Bill Crosby or anybody else tries to get a national network, they'll find something from your past to destroy that and cut that off. But they'll let the people that say what they want to say can stay there till they die. And, you know, being nice, we can write letters and vote and do things like that. But there's other things that control mass behavior.
And that connects to the idea about student leadership.
Absolutely.
You know, because their mindset.
But students will run from a bully. You can have the class president, you can have the valedictorian, but they don't control what happens on campus.
I think that we just need to be more intentional. We need to be more intentional about what it is that we want to happen to our young people, whether it's while they're there or before they get there or what happens afterwards. We have to be more intentional. And what I mean by intentional is that takes planning. Not just throwing things out there, and like you said, giving the educators who are working with these young people more of a voice to be intentional in what they are teaching them and how they're planning for their now and for their tomorrow. You know, so many times we're just not intentional, and we just let everybody else tell us, you know, what it is that we need. And you know, again, I just see it as a cyclical approach. And yeah, I don't understand how other nations are able to, and I'm not one because of what I do, control everybody's thought process. But yeah, to some extent, you know, teaching over the pandemic, we saw some things as teachers that I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. You know? So I do believe that as a nation, you know, as a state, as a city, as a school, we can be a little bit more intentional about what our young people are exposed to, and what they need to know. And I don't think we do a good enough job at being intentional about what it is that we're trying to do and how we're trying to get it done.
Thank you. I think that was a perfect word. That was a perfect word to conclude. That we need to be intentional, and we need to be intentional about connecting with one another, because we all have such rich experiences and knowledge to share, that connecting with each other on purpose, intentionally, to get the students what they need is the answer. So I will just say thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you.
If you have any questions for me, here's my contact information. It's just joya.clark@njit.edu. You can always find me by contacting the good people at the Gear Up College Bound program, because I also work for them. So if you stop by there, they always know how to reach me. And thank you again very much. And thank you, Mr. Rajan, for coming in and offering that in-classroom experience so that I could wear two hats. Thank you so much.